cut it. But I got people ready and coaches here. So good morning, guys. And I hope this time with Dr. Tim would be proved to be very beneficial for everyone, hoping to uplift your spirits as well. For those who don't know, Dr. Tim is with Barton College. He's the director for sports performance. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tim. For I don't have my notes, but uh,
Yeah,
but we are very
technically
privileged.
former director, yeah.
Okay, so technically the yeah part of Barton College Sports Performance Department, and he's here. We're blessed to have him and speak about I think one of the most important uh, things that we could really pick up during this lockdown, and with lots of webinars coming out. I think this would prove to be um, maybe very significant to whatever aspect of our lives right now and whatever we're doing. And even after the lockdown, it's still going to be very important for us. So to not to keep the ball rolling, I'll give the floor to Dr. Tim Dornemann. Tim, it's all yours. They're all yours.
All right, so I'll get my screen shared here and we'll get rolling. Let's see. Yep. Make sure everything clicked right. And let me fire up the PowerPoint. All right, so you should be able to see that. So really what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today is two things: this concept of being a coach of influence, and then a little bit about the 4 Laws program that has been developed through PowerRev and Christian Sports Performance. So really what I want to do first is sort of challenge you to think a little bit about your role as a coach or an educator and how you can utilize that. And then we'll transition into looking at the 4 Laws of Victory. It's just an example of a program you can use for character and leadership development. So that's sort of where I wanted to go. And I wanted to sort of start us out by looking at this concepts of sports and character. So I just wanted to start out with this proverb, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. I think that sort of sets the stage for this whole talk. And for us, that child could be any age. It could be any athlete or student that we're dealing with, whether it's elementary, high school, college, professional, national team. It's our effect to sort of train them up, not just physically, but in all areas of their life. So just starting out, and I'll let Ryan and Petit sort of let a couple people chime in, but anybody willing to answer these two questions, give a little bit of input on what they think about sports building character and sports revealing character as we get started here. If Petit or Ryan or somebody want, if you want to unmute somebody to sort of give their opinion, we can do that.
Okay, guys, questions for from Dr. Tim. Do sports build character and do they reveal character? Just unmute yourselves if you want to answer, or in your chat box. I'll just read it up for Dr. Tim.
Yeah, so take a second and think about those two questions, and then we'll move along a little bit. Anybody? I think do we have a chat? No. So Coach Ryan, if you want to give us your input on these two, since nobody else is speaking up.
For me, it's sports reveal character, especially on the higher level sports. It just shows the background and the training you've been and the experiences you've gone through. So most people would see your character the way you play your sport.
So how you act, how you respond to adversity within a sport. Yeah. So I think a
Well,
lot of us,
I'm sorry,
Coach
Tim.
Petit.
Well, yeah, it's funny because these two questions I was thinking about them just early this week, actually this past weekend, and I think it's a little of both. Like whoever you are, it will show through sports, and also through sports with the people around you. Through sports, they can develop further your character.
Okay. Yeah. So I think, a lot of times we can really say they reveal character. That's an easy one to look at. And you can see examples of how people react, positive or negative. And I think a lot of times we can say sports build character, but I want to challenge you to think about that a little bit more detail. And from looking at some research when I was doing my doctorate degree, when we look at just talking about sports and character development, I don't know how much of just literally playing a sport. So if you have, in the Philippines where, you have a basketball court on every street, and, if a ball is sitting there, it's getting dribbled and shot at something. Just the act of playing that sport can teach lessons, but is it always teaching character? And we also got to look at is the lessons we can teach through sports and the ones you can influence as a coach. We can't always assume those are positive, right? They can be positive or they can be negative. You can have a coach that is not a good coach, maybe not in it for the right reasons, and that can turn a talented player away from that sport. So what I really want you guys to think about today is how to harness that influence for the positive. And I want you to sort of think about that a little bit on how you can, we know sports can teach lessons. We know that these lessons transcend throughout all aspects of life, but how do we make sure they're positive and we create that environment to teach these positive lessons? So that's really what we're getting at here today. And that's why I wanted to give you this picture here a little bit, because we look at the bullseye and we're going to think a little bit, challenge you to think about, as a coach, why do you do what you want to do, how and what? And we really get stuck in the how and what of coaching. And sometimes we forget that why. We get caught up in making our practice plans, our lesson plans, how we're going to do it, and that why gets lost. So we're going to challenge you a little bit to think about the why today. And I think if we take a good look at the why, and if we're in it for the right reasons and to give that positive influence, then the how and the what can sometimes take care of themselves more. That, I think the why is a big thing we really miss. So we're going to spend a little bit of time getting you to think about that. And think about, going through sport, going through your education. Think about different adults that have been in your life that sort of shaped you and were positive influences. And a lot of times I think with athletic backgrounds, we can probably all think of maybe good coaches that, you may still stay in contact with, go to it for advice, really molded and shaped you. And there may be some coaches that you didn't enjoy playing for. So how can you try to shape your influence to be one of the ones that has that lasting influence? And that's why I like this quote here by Billy Graham. A coach will impact more young people in a year than the average person does in a lifetime. So think about, a basketball coach in the Philippines. If you have 20, 25 players on your roster and you're doing that for 20 years, that's a lot of lives you're touching. For me in strength conditioning, I love the strength and conditioning side of things. And I know Craig Shinks here watching, he sort of started things with Jim with AIA Power, but he recognized, that impact of strength and conditioning because we work with all sports. So, for example, at Barton, we're really trying to support our finances through using athletics to drive our enrollment. So we have about 1,000 students, 600 are now athletes. So, you know, each of those coaches touch a lot of athletes, but my strength coaches that worked for me when I was directing sports performance, they were interacting with all 600 athletes. Okay, so that's a big impact, and you know, as we look at that. So just think about that. Now, what I want to do is show a quick, I think it's like a 5-minute video that just gives a good example of a coach.
When you walk around the grounds of Gainesville State School, you'll see just about everything you would on any other high school campus. There are students, teachers, a computer lab, and a gym. Except here, the students are convicted criminals.
It's an incarceration facility for kids that have violated the law.
Each day starts at a tiny dorm room they call home and continues marching from class to class, abiding by a strict schedule. In fact, the one thing that makes them feel like kids again is football.
It's like you remote model on campus, you know what I'm saying? Everybody want to play on the football team.
Just to put on a Tornadoes uniform is a reward, not a right. You must have good behavior and good grades. Not to mention, every game is played on the road, but it's worth it to escape on Friday nights and enjoy a small piece of freedom they gave up. But each week, there comes that constant reminder of who they are and what they've done.
They don't treat us as a regular person in the world. They treat us like we're just some alien just somewhere out of nowhere.
I mean, they look at us like animals in a cage, like we don't deserve a second chance or another opportunity to be something in life.
After hearing the ridicule and losing 8 straight weeks, the Tornadoes were once again on the road, traveling to play private school Power Grapevine Faith for the first time, who had moved up a division. Their head coach, Chris Hogan, had a game plan in mind, and it had nothing to do with football.
We were going to show them that in this country, if you make the right decisions, people will get on your side and support you, and it doesn't matter what your background is, you can make it.
In a selfless suggestion, Coach Hogan sent out an email and requested his fans, his players, parents, do something so out of the ordinary in the football culture. He asked them to cheer for Gainesville State.
These young men will not have any fans outside of the faculty from their own school. Their parents will not be there. I want some Lion fans to sit on the visitor side and cheer for the Gainesville team throughout the game.
I thought, okay, this is cool that Chris wants us to do this leading up to it, but getting there that night, it was so easy to transition from being a fan for the Faith Lions to a fan for the Tornadoes.
You know, the idea of giving and just being there to support those kids, those young men that have never had that before.
So for the first time, the always on the road Tornadoes would feel as if they were at home. And as kickoff approached, it was obvious something was different.
It looked like they thought they were at the wrong end of the field because they know they don't have any fans.
And we just looking, I just kept doing my plays. I seen how they were split up, but I figured they just didn't have enough room on their side. I want y'all to line up in the line. They're making a spirit line. I like, say what, Coach? He said, can you repeat that? And he said, they're making a spirit line for y'all to run through. I like, that's what's up, sir. That's what's up.
When it happened, it was dynamic. It was one of the most unbelievable things I'd ever seen.
When I ran through this, like I felt like it was just like something, like angels or something. That's all I felt. Because I was just running through as fast as I can. I just feeling the wind rushing my face.
That feeling of being unleashed lasted throughout the game, and so did the cheers.
We had a penalty like the third play of the game, and I heard booing behind me. I turned around, and it was a great amount of fans.
I remember when I was making like a play, I made a chocolate, and people yelling my name. I'm like, I don't even know these people.
They were just like ours that night. I can remember rooting for their little quarterback, and I felt like he belonged to me.
Our kids were their kids, and their kids were our kids, and all kids were the same.
It wasn't enough to lead the Tornadoes to victory. As expected, Grapevine Faith won 33-14, and the Tornadoes finished the season 0-9. But it didn't matter, because for the first time in a long time, someone was in their corner and that alone was worth celebrating.
I was like, hey, y'all, let's go on and get coached, man. I don't care if we lost or not, man, because I was feeling good.
I feel like we was in the Super Bowl championship game or something. Like, we won that. I mean, winning, like, in our heart, spiritual-wise, I mean, we won.
I've been in state championships of different kinds, and there's nothing was like this, nothing.
Isaiah and the rest of the Tornadoes will never forget the feelings they had on that night. And while it didn't erase the mistakes they've made, it showed 14 teenagers that regardless of the bad things they've done in their past, there was reason to look ahead.
I cried. When after the game, I went back to my room, I cried. I think that your family are the only ones that love you. God ain't the only one that love you. Other people love you too.
This is what I was hoping and praying would happen. I hope that it gave them hope.
I see the world in a different way now. I mean, I don't just see, like, I'm the victim no more. So much love because, you know, I came from a broken home family. So, I mean, having all that love, it just rose my spirits up.
They got to be kids that night. They got to be a teenager and experience Friday night football in Texas.
So I just wanted to share that as an example of just that capacity for influence that you can have. And really, when you're looking at coaching and being a coach of influence, it starts first with that inward reflection. You got to look into yourself and sort of why are we answering that why? This is a great book by Joel Ehrman, Inside Out Coaching, and it starts with that personal reflection, and it leads to looking at being honest with yourself, and are you a transactional coach or transformational? And when we talk about transactional coach, those are the coaches that are just in it for the job. They're in it for the paycheck. They may be in it for the championships or the recognition, things that are more about themselves. Whereas a transformational coach is there about making the difference in the lives of their athletes and students. And that's what I just want to challenge you to sort of decide to be a transformational coach, be a coach of influence, and to really be intentional about making that positive influence in the lives of all the people that you come across. And to do that, you can sort of look a little bit at a couple questions and sort of asking yourself, these are some things you can sort of, you know, on your own time when you have a chance, can ask, you know, why do you want to be a coach? What are your goals? And what can you do to make yourself better as a coach? And I think, you know, this series of talks that, you know, AIA Philippines is doing is a great way of looking at that when we had this downtime and challenging us to be better. Especially with this, you know, we're sort of forcing this downtime where when we're caught up in our normal, what used to be our normal lives, let's see, making sure I'm unmuted. And we get caught up in life. So this slowdown almost gives us some time to reflect and find ourselves. So I think that's important for us all to do. And this is something, it's not a one-time thing. It's something that I think we all need to do periodically to keep ourselves focused. And these questions will help you develop a coaching philosophy. Okay. So the importance of your philosophy is it really gives you that guiding statement. It's like a mission statement for you as a coach. And by having that philosophy, it keeps you focused and it gives you that consistency with how you make decisions. Could be decisions on when you play games, you know, maybe not traveling to a really far place that's going to take your athletes out where they get back real late and they can't, you know, puts them in a bad spot for their education, or, you know, an athlete that's somewhat hurt and really shouldn't be playing, but he's really good and you want to win. You know, what is your philosophy allows you to have something to say, hey, I'm coaching for the athletes, not for the victories. I want to have that athlete be healthy and continue playing. It also helps with your communication to parents because they know what your philosophy is. You make this known and you can stay consistent with that. Gives everybody a common vision, and it really sets you up for success. And a great example of a coach with a coaching philosophy is John Wooden. And I think, especially in the Philippines where basketball is king, people are familiar with John Wooden and his legendary ability as a coach. And he developed these 15 blocks in his pyramid of success. And this wasn't something that he did overnight. It took quite a while for him to come through it. But if you take a look at this a little bit closer, and you look at this bottom row, okay, you all as coaches know how powerful that strong team chemistry can be in having a special season, right? So things like industriousness, friendship, loyalty, cooperation, enthusiasm. When I look at that, that tells me that's team unity, the things you want to have a strong team chemistry and unity. You know, if we can develop those, that's really the basis for something special to happen that can put things in place to allow this competitive greatness to happen. So if you haven't looked into the pyramid of success that John Wooden has developed, I mean, I recommend it to everyone. I have this poster hanging above my computer in my office. It gives me something to reflect on and reminds me of my why. So having that is just a great example. If you haven't looked at it, look at it again. So I want to change gears here for the rest of our time and start looking at how can we be intentional. And we're going to talk about the 4 laws of victory. And this was developed through PowerRev.
And you know, we've been through a lot.
I got some timing things stuck in here. But we're looking at developing that total athlete. And, you know, and I've written a book on this, but it's not something that came from me. You'll even see if you're familiar with Campus Crusade where some of these concepts came.
And you know, we've been.
But Nick Cook was one that originated this, and he came up with these 4 laws of victory, which is love, responsibility, humility, and commitment.
And you know, we've been through a lot since we've been here. I've lost a player. You know, I had a player pass away. We had to get through that. You know, car wrecks. It just feels like the first 2 years we came up against so many challenges that had nothing to do with playing the game of football, and we could always fall back on, you know, love, humility, commitment, and responsibility to kind of pull us back together. Right. You know, and it gives me chills when I think about it.
Real quick, and that was Darren Waters, who was one of the first coaches to really implement and use a 4 laws of victory plan in his high school program. He actually was working with Nick Cook. Sorry about the transitions here. I didn't get all these things fixed, but first one is looking at love. So love we're looking at as a sacrifice, and it's looking at being a choice, not a feeling. We sort of romanticize love to the movies, but it's really that conscious choice to work for each other, sacrifice, and it's a conscious choice. And this is a good quote by Vince Lombardi. If we all have love for each other, if you don't have it, forget it. Love is the answer to everything. And our second one is looking at responsibility, and responsibility is huge in athletics. I think you guys know the importance of having that responsibility on a team. Is it's really, sorry about these, but it's getting people to buy in that everything we do has a consequence, and that consequence is that athletes, good or bad. Humility is huge in that nobody has all the answers. I think modeling this as a coach is huge because they can see that vulnerability, and that just draws them closer to you and tighter as a team. Being able to ask for help, getting input. What are your athletes seeing out there on the court? And they can see you add that into their strategy is a big thing. But not letting our pride get in the way. And I think athletics, we can get prideful pretty easy. So this one's a hard one for us to do, but we know it's got to be bigger than us. Otherwise, we aren't as successful. And then commitment's our last one. And it's just, we look at things that society tells us are success, like fame, beauty, and wealth, but that's not the end all. Championships, trophies gather dust, and people forget about who won 20 years ago. Okay, so we need to look at what is important to us, and that's the lessons that last a lifetime, and that's your real legacy. So the 4 laws of victory is really a workout. We sort of use it as a pre-session. So in a warm-up or 5 or 10 minutes, 15 minutes before you start your practice, you can do a champions meeting. This could be at the end of practice as well, but we do a workout, which is a topic, one of those 4 areas, and then we'd have some sort of sharing. Could be a story, could be a quote, anything that sort of guides that discussion, and then you have a discussion starter. So you can choose these by week or rotate through months, and we're just going to show you a little bit about how you can put these lessons together. So here's an example of a week, and just using that love as our theme, we have a discussion starter, use that as a way to get people asking questions. And this here is an example of a love lesson. So just giving a precursor on this one, it'll explain it, but it's a story about a softball team and pretty much the end of a season of a senior who's never ever hit a home run, who hits a home run and gets injured. And it tells us a little bit about the character of the players that were involved. So I'm just going to play. This is about 6 minutes, so bear with me, but it's a powerful example of something that we can use to teach a lesson from.
Already today, we've heard a Major League manager's interview with more tone for bleeps, more tone than a test of the emergency broadcast system, and an obvious timing error at a critical moment in an NBA game that may well have turned around the playoff momentum in that game. So against the daily high-stakes, high-volume intensity of the sports industry comes a story of such stunning innocence it reminds us what these games really should be about. You may well have already heard of the softball home run that was only scored with the help of the opposing team, but today you will also see it. Tom Rinaldi with today's centerpiece.
Gibson swings and a fly ball to deep right field. This is going to be a home run. Unbelievable!
A swing and a belt. Left field. Way back. Touch the ball, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life.
Alongside such unforgettable home runs, the setting for this one was a bit different. In a small town in the middle of Washington State, on a field inside a chain-linked fence, in a game fewer than 100 people saw. A home run memorable not for the distance it traveled, or the game it decided, but for the meaning it carried. The last Saturday in April, the second game of a softball doubleheader between Central Washington and Western Oregon.
Well, we were both neck and neck fighting for the conference championship.
As a senior, this was Sarah Tucholsky's last chance to win a championship. She'd never hit a home run before, not in college, not in her life.
A 5'2", I'm not very tall. I'm more a line drive hitter. I don't hit for power.
But in the top of the second inning, with 2 runners on the second pitch, that changed.
I hit that pitch and it just went.
And we're just cheering, and the runners are cheering as they round the base to head home. And then I'm going, where's Sarah?
In her excitement, Tucholsky failed to touch first base, so she quickly turned back.
Her pivoting just didn't pivot with her. And I heard her kind of yell, and she just dropped to the ground, and I was like, oh no.
Just fell immediately and was in a lot of pain. Just, I tried to keep my legs straight, but I was in so much pain that I couldn't really keep still.
Tucholsky, with a torn ACL, crawled back to first base. She was a long way from reaching home plate and keeping her first and only home run.
When she got back to first base, she laid there and she hugged on to first base. And then at that time, I was staring at the base and I go, what on earth are we going to do?
And I turned the umpire standing right next to me. I said, what is the ruling if I put somebody in for Sarah? He said, it'll be a 2-run single.
If anybody her team would have helped Sarah, she would have been called out.
That was the problem. None of Tucholsky's teammates were allowed to touch her. That's when Central Washington's Mallory Holtman, a player with more home runs than any other in conference history, a player for the opposing team, spoke up.
I went to the home plate umpire and asked if we could pick her up and carry her, and he looked at me a little strange.
And the umpire went and said, yes, you can do that. I'm still standing there in shock. I said, thank you so much.
We asked her, is it okay if we pick you up and carry you around the bases? And I say yes, and and say thank you. And she says, you hit the ball over the fence, you deserve it.
For that reason only, because she deserved it, Holtman and Liz Wallace began to carry the injured Tucholsky, stopping to touch her left foot on each base as the three made their way around the diamond.
We actually started laughing because we were just wondering what this would look like to all the people in the stands.
When I looked up, I didn't see, giant smiles and screams. I saw emotion and tears and people crying.
It's a great moment when someone has character to step up and do the right thing at the right time.
It's emotional. You're proud. Be associated with those kids.
That's the first home run of the season for number 8, Sarah Tucholsky.
The fact is, I made my goal. I hit a home run, and it's my last at-bat of my career, but I, made my goal, so I'm proud of myself.
Mallory Holtman, Liz Wallace, and the Central Washington team lost the game that day, 4-2. Sarah Tucholsky lost the rest of her season and her career to a knee injury. But for the spirit of sportsmanship, a greater victory, made on a long trot around the bases, a trip that truly touched them all.
I have a lot of respect for.
So I just wanted to share that as an example of, it's just a powerful example of something you can use as a clip. It's a little bit longer, and I hope you don't mind sharing that. But this here is an example of how to use that and frame some of these questions. So doing it the right thing at the right time, and just challenging people to think about how often do we see that happen, and why or why not? Why don't we see that happen? Does it happen to people that are strangers like this? Or if we do things at the right time, is it for people close to us? And just challenging our athletes with these questions to get them to think about things a little bit. The second workout, because this is sort of based on a 3-day-a-week program, is based on an article. So this is basically an article that I found in my hometown newspaper that was about a basketball player in high school. And he had just recently lost his mother to cancer, and he wasn't there at the start of the game. So his name wasn't in the lineup card. And he came in and he was behind the bench, and a lot of people were consoling him, and they were asking him how he was, and he really wanted to be like, he wanted to play. He wanted to take part in the game. So the coach put him in, but the umpires had to basically look at, he's not a lineup card, it's against the rules. So they actually had to give a technical foul. So the other team actually got together, they huddled. The coach was telling the players, well, we're going to be classy about this. We're not going to make this free throw. Who wants to take it? So one of the captains stepped up, and basically, the referee gives him the ball. He just sort of rolls it over the end line. He didn't take the shot. So it wasn't a penalty. It fulfilled the rule, but it wasn't a penalty that, caused any change in the scoreboard. So you can talk about those things about, is it easier to do something for a stranger or someone why is that? And just challenging them to look for an opportunity to do something good. And then the third day is sort of a wrap up when you're looking at that challenge and saying, which story impacted them and why. Did they see anything during the week when someone did the right thing at the right time for unprompted? And if for them, did they do anything like that? If they did, what was it? Was it someone that knew? How did it make them feel? To really reflect on that theme of love. So that's just an example of sort of a week of those programs, but things that I look at, you can find sources of these around you anywhere. So books, I like to look at books of different coaches, and you may do that as well, especially for basketball coaches or things like that. But some of my favorite authors are Tony Dungy, Jim Tressel, wrote the Winner's Manual. John Maxwell is a leadership guru. And of course, John Wooden, I love John Wooden's stuff. And there's a number of different books that he has out there on coaching and quotes. So really it can be videos, clips, and I like looking at ESPN, Sports Illustrated. ESPN's got Outside the Lines, E60, that are great stories about character stories that you can really use as teachable moments. So part of it is, if you're going to be a coach of influence, is you really want to look and have your eyes looking for any of these teachable moments that you can use, things that are happening around you that you can do. One thing I pulled out of Jim Tressel's Winner's Manual book was he has what's called a block O. I sort of took it and put the block PR for PowerRev. But it was a tool that he used for goal setting. He'd have athletes look at, what are their purpose goals and academic, sport, family goals, and just write those things down. And then he had a sheet that allowed them to do action steps. But using like a quote, using, John Wooden's Pyramid of Success, looking at, staying in control and poise and things like that, you can challenge people to look at, what do we really ever comes out of losing control? Usually it's not something good. How does it affect a team or a game? And how can you improve that self-control? Within the book, I've actually developed a week of lessons for all 15 of these weeks. And we can make those available to you if you want to use them. But also wanted to give you an idea.
Those are kind of the intangible.
How you could develop these things yourself a little bit. And with this, we're looking at, how do we develop those champions in sport and life, and how we have that influence on our athletes and our students beyond the classroom. And part of that is getting to know them and really investing in them. It's that common quote of, people don't always care until they know how much you care. And if they know you care about them as a coach, then they're willing to do the things you want them to do to be successful. The conditioning, the strategy, the skill development, all those things you want out of them, they'll buy into your system more if they know that you have that care and that you're really what's important you show them what's important to you is them as a person, their growth, more so than the athletic success side of things. And I think a lot of times you find,
what they do on the field, you can't put your hand on, but.
And I know we've had Coach Nash talk, and he is a firm believer in developing his athletes, is that they, I think if you do set that culture up, more often than not, a lot of those coaches can be very, very successful when you combine those things. So I just want to show these two clips a little bit here as we finish these things up on, again, Coach Darren Waters talking a little bit about a player of his that really, these 4 laws really helped guide and transform.
Those are kind of the intangible things you can't put your hand on, but having been other places and not had the same kind of success that we're having here, I can tell you what the X factor is. We have a very open door policy. There's a young man that's graduating as a senior this year. When he came in as a freshman or as a sophomore my first year, I think it was all too much for him. He didn't buy what I was selling and stepped back and walked away. And one of my players that had stayed with me talked him into coming out as a senior, and he ended up going from a kid that everybody said was going to drop out, he was going to end up in jail, to a kid that finished the league as one of the best offensive linemen in the league, is going to play in the All-Star game, and is probably going to end up going to college. Not to play football, which I think is even better.
Right.
And that's...
And, that's a big thing, I think, is looking at, how we can have that impact beyond the sport. I just want to leave you here with my contact information, and this, I'm going to unshare the screen here, and we can sort of talk informally a little bit about this. Let's see. Oh, there's stop share. Yeah, I apologize for the PowerPoint sort of taking a life of its own. But I hope you got the main message, which is we need to sort of step back as coaches. And even in the master's program that I'm starting, one of our classes, we spent some time looking at character strengths. So that's even something you can look at too, is a way of looking at character strengths within yourself and your athletes, doing that self-reflection. And then we're also using a book by Brett Bartholomew, which is Conscious Coaching, where he defines what he calls these archetypes, which are types of personality traits that athletes have. And he looks at the strengths and weaknesses of each of these archetypes and gives some input on how best to deal with these different types of athlete personalities to get the most out of them and to work with them most successfully. So a lot of them are looking at how can we do that. So really what I wanted to encourage you to is, one, look at that aspect of, we know character, if we want to have good character development, it doesn't happen by accident. It's got to be intentional if we want somebody to be positive through our sporting experience. So I challenge you as coaches to take that initiative and that challenge to be a coach of influence, to be a transformational coach. And then to me, it doesn't matter if you use something like the 4 laws of victory or something else, but just have some sort of method that's intentional to carry that positive message forward. And hopefully that came across a little bit in what we had. And we can talk a little bit more informally here about, maybe experiences you've had, or, just informally talk a little bit about how we can sort of set that framework up as a positive coach. Let's see, we got
Tim. Maybe a question would be, what are there any suggestions that you could give us and to the many coaches watching, listening right now about with the signs of the times, with the things that are going on now, with the limitations that we have? Any suggestions on how to start off with action points in respect to your talk? in respect to maybe the players, the kids, the athletes that are under us or that we're working with? How could we be able to start this 4 laws that you just presented?
Yeah, I think part of it could be, using platforms like this with your teams, just getting them together a little bit. A lot of times with our teams, you all know there's something special about getting people together. And I think that's something we sort of lose in this time of isolation. So it could be doing things like that just to get people together. But then maybe in this downtime, the other thing is reaching out and trying to connect with your individual players. The more you can learn about them and their situation, the more powerful that connection is going to be once you get back on the field or on the court. So I would start with those things. Resources you can look at is like, Positive Coaching Alliance. They have a lot of great information out there. Different books you can sort of do is sort of self-study. There's ones that I looked at when I was, doing my doctorate degree. One of them had, I think it was Jim Thompson, I think was the name of the fellow that wrote a couple books, but he did this positive charting. He'd carry a clipboard in practice, and he might have a blank page on there, and he tried to write down something positive about every athlete on his team. Because when you think about it, all our athletes need that positive feedback. But naturally, who are the athletes that tend to get most of our attention and feedback? Probably either the star player or somebody that's, disrupting something. So you have a lot of those good players that we can impact, especially maybe even ones that don't play, but we can impact their lives that, we can make, by jotting down and saying, hey, you may not have scored a lot, but you had a lot of effort on defense. Maybe you didn't do everything perfect, but the effort was great. Giving them that feedback builds them up. So we're constantly looking at ways to build up. And he challenged himself to try to find one thing for every athlete and to have those touch points. So those type of things. Coach Wooden had his method for delivering criticism. He would never criticize an athlete just by first pointing out what they did wrong. He always sandwiched it between two positives, so it might have been, maybe an athlete was out of control and they didn't have a good handle and they lost the ball control. He might say, okay, great being aggressive, but you lost control because you didn't have this technique. And then he come back with another positive, and that really how you do that. And some of the positive coaching ones call that your emotional bank account. You're building them up by putting all these positives in there. Then if you have to discipline or correct them, it gives you something to make a withdrawal from. So you always have that net positive that you're working from, and that can help us build that relationship with our athletes. Positive Coaching Alliance, I think they do a 5-to-1 is what they call their magic ratio, trying to do 5 positives to 1 negative. So those are some things I would think about, the more, and all these things we're doing with my grad class, every one of these archetypes, it goes back to getting to know them, know who they are, and then you can relate to how best to approach them. And I think that takes time as a coach to recognize the individuals and really to treat a team as individuals to really make that impact. And that might be, like Coach Petit was saying, what we can do in this downtime is we got time. So, if we do these video chats and bring our teams together and make these connections. I was talking, I got a chat from Coach Toady, and he was talking about his discipleship over this time. He was able to reach out to all these people that he worked with in the PBA 20 years ago, and he's been able to have some conversations and really help talk people through things. So especially when we're going through these times of struggle, we're stronger together than we are separately. So I think things we can do to bring ourselves together like this and even with your teams, and just checking in with your players. How's it going today? Reaching out can be huge, because they could be struggling, and that good positive interaction or being open for them to open up to could be huge for them. So.
Well, it's so appropriate that you mentioned that everybody they have the time now, because before lockdown, it's like the problem with everyone was they don't have enough time for everything. But now that lockdown is here, I think we don't have any excuse. And maybe the best, if there are coaches, people watching or listening right now, maybe the best way to start off anything that you would want after this talk of Dr. Tim would be to start off with, if you got your kids at home, then you start off with your kids. Actually, Tim, that was a great idea you threw to the group, that I may be able to use after this talk now with my two kids, putting in like a couple of positives so that I could put in their positive bank. What do you call that? Something to withdraw from if we have to remind or discipline the kids. That may be a good start off point for everyone here if you have your kids at home. And if you don't have kids, maybe nieces and nephews. So yeah, that's a good idea, Tim. So timely. About the sports, any particular, aside from self-affirmation and positive reinforcements for the kids, is there any other things that we could discuss, practical discussion, practical topics we could discuss with our own teams via online?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that sticks out too is I read some articles when I was doing my degree on how we view competition, because if we look at the opposition as the enemy that we're competing against, that can drive and fuel like anger and aggression and things like that. Whereas some people were looking at this concept of competition as more of a challenge to do our best as a team, and looking at the opponent as an adversary that was there to help you achieve your best. Because if you're going to be great as a team, you need to have someone as an opposition that pushes you to that level. So if you look at the competition more as a partner in reaching your full potential as a team, that mindset is a little bit different. Does that make sense? It's a way you view, it's more they're a partner in competition versus an adversary that can be more negative.
In a way, what we do, we've done that before. What we do is, especially with my kids, I tell them instead of referring to the opposite team as opponents, or in Tagalog here is kaaway, we just tell them playmates. We call them playmates, or instead of playing against each other, it's playing with each other. So maybe those are very important things to point out. How you use and what words to use makes a lot of difference. It changes the perspective with the change of words.
Yeah. And I think another thing too, and I know we got some AIA folk here, even from the States, is sometimes these focal points, so, as athletes, it's so important to keep our focus, and sometimes we get distracted, whether it's our emotions or things like that. And FCA, AIA, they've always been big about, even having something, whether you write it on your shoe, or having a little cross there, or having something like that, something you can look at that can get you centered back in, get you refocused, especially when emotions can sort of take us out of our game. It can bring us back into that moment and sort of help us. Some of those strategies might be useful to talk about to athletes now.
Those kinds of symbols and just gentle reminders. Whenever going gets tough, you just look to one part or to a side, and you just remember how to what are the most important parts of what you're going through. Um, yeah, this is the best time for everyone to help change the perspectives of our young athletes, our kids, especially towards competition. You know how competition makes and breaks people, and just like how Coach Dr. Tim opened up his talk, it's with two questions: sports revealing one's character, or sports developing or creating one's character. So this is the best time while kids are idle. Kids are not really into actual competitions to maybe fine tune, change the perspective of how they should look at competitive sports in particular.
Yeah, and another thing, and I can send Ryan a copy of those, the the block PR and the goal statement sheets, but that might be something you could use with your teams as well, is just taking a step back and looking at, what are their goals? What are their goals as athletes, as students, as members of their families, all those sort of 6 facets of their lives, and then looking at how do they make those action steps, because in a way it makes them reflect and put a plan together. And you as a coach, if you're touching base with them on all these different goals, imagine how much you're learning about them, what's important to them, what do they want to accomplish, and that can make you more effective as a coach if you're doing that. So using some of those, and I think in Jim Tressel's book, he was talking about that process of being able to guide goal setting. He'd have these athletes for 4 or 5 years. The first year they came through, he had to be very active with them developing these goals, because they didn't know how to develop goals. They had to really be led through the process. But by the time they were seniors, he could sort of back away and they could sort of develop their goals. And I think if you're looking at goals are like programs. They're always open for revision. They're like a living thing that's more of a circle. If you don't quite get it, you tweak it and you change it around. Or if you accomplish a goal, then what's your next goal? So they're always sort of leading to something. So I think, that's a positive thing you can do. That's a real life lesson that you can invest in them, is maybe looking at these goals and that inward reflection. Maybe spend some time, if you haven't thought about a coaching philosophy or a mission statement for your program, take some time and think about those things, because those could be very powerful for you once you get rolling again, because those are the things that when we get busy, we don't give much thought. So if we have this downtime, we can invest laying that foundation. The stronger we make the foundation, then the better we are once things get crazy again and we can get back to normal, and we don't have as much time to think about these things because life just, runs rampant, like you were saying, and we don't get the touch points with our athletes. We don't necessarily get to know them, or we run through things too quick, and the important stuff, if we're not intentional, doesn't happen.
But that was a good point you brought up about as coaches, sometimes we want to do something for our kids, but then we just realize that we actually, as coaches, don't know what to do, and we need to be led by someone who is more knowledgeable or better than us in some regard to whatever we want to do. And that goes to that brings to my point that even as coaches, if as we want to change the perspective, the value system of our kids, of our athletes, we have to ask ourselves also, if we're going to, do we believe in the things that we want to share with our athletes? Because it's going to be hard for a coach to teach the proper perspective of competition if the coach himself is a sore loser of sorts. So that may be a good time also. This is a good time to self-reflect as us as coaches and as leaders on the value system that we have before even talking and tackling these things with our players. So just like what Dr. Tim said, he was just using it as an example. Coaches wanting to teach something, but they don't know themselves, so they have to also study before they face their athletes. So something that might be a good take home for us coaches right now. We're listening and watching, to self-reflect also and self-evaluate ourselves as to the value systems that we have, that we want also our athletes to have, for us to impart to them. So maybe in a way, that's properly the gist of the 4 laws that Dr. Tim is also sharing with us. For all the coaches out there right now, just ask away. No, it's okay to ask. Even if it's in Tagalog, I'll just they might be intimidated. I'll just translate for Tim. And before we continue, Tim, I'd just like to recognize some of I think some of our VIPs, like straight from North Pole. We have Jim Rummelhart from helping with a Coach Mo is in the house, and Craig, my man, and there you go. Brother Totti, our head here in with Coach Ryan, the heads of Athletes in Action Philippines are also here. Maybe guys, you could also impart to us any insights that you may have with this session that Dr. Tim and I are having with the coaches. Just feel free to unmute yourselves and get on track.
One thing I was going to add, and I just echo Tim's thoughts and your thoughts as far as the motivation of the coaches. I know when I was trying to coach my own kids, there was we really have to evaluate some of the deeper motivations that we might have in our lives, some insecurities or goals that we try to, I know many times I would be frustrated with my kids because I would try to help. They weren't interested in learning strength conditioning, working hard enough or whatever. And it would be frustration, and that would pour out into some negative consequences. And I had a tendency sometimes to, as Tim was talking about, positive reinforcement. I would say, you did a good job with this and this, but then list, twice as many negative things. And I learned the hard way many times. They didn't want to ride home with me. So I can tell you from personal reflection and being around Coach Mo and many trips and fall tours and stuff together, I've learned a lot from so many people, and coaches that I've been a part of in the fall tour. And that's one thing to continue to, you always continue to learn no matter how long you've been in the profession.
Great one, Jim. Who would want to ride a sleigh with you, huh? Thank you, Jim. Yeah, that's a great point. Sometimes as coaches, we tend to have it our way or the highway. Then we're coming back home in our homes to our own kids. Sometimes we bring that to them, and it takes us. It's the hard way for us to learn that that's not the right way. I'd just like to share, as Jim was talking about kids. I don't know if in particular your own kids or the kids in as your athletes, but my own kids, my son in particular, 10-year-old boy, I was kept egging him to work on his shooting. We have a ring at home, so he could just take shots. But he's more interested in watching creative destruction on YouTube. And sometimes it's always a push and pull between us. But I just figured out something. So like I did this, I started doing this 3 days ago. So I gave him a shooting game wherein the result will determine the number of hours he'll be on TV the next day. And he's looking forward to that shooting game because it determines his TV time on the next day. So something to think about, coaches. Maybe it's not going to be the my way or the highway, but yeah, these times are forcing everyone to be more creative, to be more intentional about a lot of things. So this is, I bet, the best time to grab the opportunity to become better. I'm telling you, coaches, no better time to get better than now.
Yeah,
Craig, sorry, Tim, go. Sorry.
That conscious coaching book really it's opened my eyes a lot to different personality types and, like you were saying, different approaches for different athletes, and you got to find out what they respond to.
What is the title of that book, Tim, and by who? Do you know? I'll just type it in chat box.
It's Conscious Coaching by Brett Bartholomew.
Okay. How do you spell Bartholomew? Oh my goodness.
I don't know if
H-O. Oh, forgive the wrong spelling. Just
yeah, I don't know if I got it in my
I
office.
Miss a lot of letters there. Sorry. Yeah. But you know who we're talking about.
Yeah, that's pretty close. I mean, you put it into Google, it'll find it.
Craig, any thoughts? Coach Mo, Brother Totti, any thoughts? I'm putting you on the spot. Sorry.
I just want to say one thing. I was at a basketball game this past winter, and it was a really good team. In the high school team I went to, it was really a good game. But at the end of the game, the coach actually had the players go into the stands and start cleaning up the trash, the concessions that people had been eating. And it was just shocking to see, that he was doing Action Point, really about humility and serving the other team. So I thought what a great action point for your whole team to go out, spread out, and pick up the trash of the opposing competition. So I thought that was an interesting action point, and I thought obviously the Four Laws victory when they did that.
Yeah, exactly. Especially here in the Philippines. Thank you, Craig. Especially here in the Philippines, basketball teams here after a game, you go into their locker after the team left. Oh my goodness, it's like a heap of trash waiting for the maintenance guy to fix. So yeah, I think those are things that the coaches should start it off. But yeah, I think I go back to that my point a while ago that we can only change the attitude perspective of our athletes if our own perspective and attitudes are also on that same line of thinking with what we want our players to have. So not just the education of our athletes, but more importantly, our own education as leaders, as coaches.
Yeah, one thing I'm going to add to Craig's story with being 39 years with AIA. We used to, many of those years with the AI Fall Basketball Tour, we had a player with us for several years, Rod Foster. He played in the NBA, played at UCLA, and Rod was very humble. And he and I would, we'd be the last ones out of the locker room, and we would pick up the towels and clean up the trash and tape and everything and throw it away. And it was really a witness for a lot of the managers and stuff, because they would be the ones. And so that's just an example of here's somebody that played in the NBA helping to pick up trash in the locker room.
Yeah, I was a witness to that, Jim. You were always following behind the team, carrying a lot of stuff. I saw that. God bless your heart there, Jim. And for those who don't know, Athletes in Action USA, they usually bring tour basketball teams here, led by our very own Coach Morris Michalski, Coach Mo for short. He brings along with Jim and other AIA guys, AIA staff, a basketball team here that plays all over our country and play against a very tough competition. And just to be a great witness to the people here in the Philippines, they play very competitively, very intense, but still very godly. And that's what they're trying to really do. And those are one of the objectives that they have when they go around countries playing basketball. And the Philippines has been blessed to be one of the regular stops of the AIA US Tour team, composed of mostly of NCAA Division I players. Notably, one player that Coach Mo and the AIA Tour team brought here in the Philippines was a team who one Gabe Norwood was playing with before he got noticed in the PBA. And then Los Angeles Lakers' Alex Caruso was also one of the players who played here in the Philippines with the AIA tour team who now plays for the LA Lakers, and our very own Coach Mo is the most of the time is the coach. Coach Mo, welcome.
Can you hear?
Yeah, we can.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Oh,
we can.
Good. Just a couple. It's nice to be with you. It really is. I'll give you just a couple quick thoughts here. One, to your point about locker rooms and post-game stuff and the stands. Coach Wooden, who I really, really, really respect. He has a simple line that says, always leave a locker room better than down. And you know that when you're on the road and you're traveling somewhere, invite you back. And room better. It hurts your. It takes a little.
Coach, sorry.
You would know that because room set from our teams that we brought.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Coach Mo. You're a bit breaking up. The audio is breaking up. Yeah, but sometimes it's breaking up. I just like to reiterate what you said so that they could understand. What Coach Mo was saying was there's a saying by Coach John Wooden that whenever you leave the locker room should be much better looking than I'm just paraphrasing, much better looking than the way it was when you entered the locker room. That's one of Coach John Wooden's principles. Go ahead, Coach Mo. I'm just trying to reiterate whenever the audio is breaking down.
Okay. Yeah. Two, when you were talking about, I thought Tim's point about working on focal points is really important because all of us can drift and things that don't deserve our attention can get them. And so you need to be proactive in figuring out ways to get back into a proper mental approach. And so finding focal points was a great little point. I also wanted to say that there's a couple of books. The one that Tim recommended is excellent. There's a book called Season of Life by Jeffrey Marks. Marks, M-A-R-X. It's outstanding. It's a must read for. And so it's inside out coaching. Out coaching by DORNEMANN that I would highly recommend for is called by Todd Gongwer. And I would say the COVID time here in front of those books and read them with mind and open heart. They are so foundational. Lead for God's Sake by Todd Gongwer is a must read. Inside Out Coaching by Joe Ehrmann, a must read. And Season of Life by Jeffrey Marks, New York Times bestseller. It's a must read. Every coach that would play for everyone who's played for me that wants to aspire to be a coach must read those books.
So that's going to be part
of. Did you hear that?
Yes, sir. Yes, Coach. Whoever wants to aspire to be a coach should be reading these books. We will.
Yep.
We will.
I think you'll be really, really glad.
Thank you, Coach.
Now they're not written in Tagalog.
We'll come up with one. We'll come out with a Tagalog version for everything.
That's great.
Thank you, Coach Mo. That's great. That's Coach Mo for you. We have Coach Toti Andes. He's who started working for AIA Philippines, working with the PBA players back in the early 90s. And then together with Coach Ryan Elizaga, who's now leading our group here with in the AIA Philippines chapter, so to speak. Coach Ryan, any thoughts? Then I'll give it back to Coach Dr. Tim to conclude, since I think our coaches right now are still trying to soak up everything Dr. Tim has shared with us. No questions being asked, Dr. Tim. They're either in awe or still trying to process everything.
Or sleep.
No, your time is sleeping time. Ours is lunchtime, or maybe they're eating already.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I think maybe a good use of this downtime is if you're going to commit to be an intentional coach, maybe thinking about what do you want to be intentional about? What are the attributes you want to see in your team, like that humility? And then how can you do that? By doing actions like cleaning up the locker room better than it was before. And that's part of what I think behind the 4 laws of victory. And, you know, looking at AIA, it's obviously based off of the 4 spiritual laws. So it's developed to be almost, I think, like modern day parables, getting kids to think about things that have deeper meanings. What are life lessons you want to convey to your team, you know, about acting right, by being committed, being responsible, and shaping those lessons. And that's why it's sort of like giving them something as simple as a quote to think about, and then having that discussion. Because I think it's important, especially when we talk about peer pressure. I haven't read it in a book, but I feel strongly that if you have a athlete or a student that's young and they haven't thought about a situation and something comes up, they're more prone to fall in that peer pressure because they're going to get caught up in that wave, not wanting to disappoint their peers, and they may get led to do things that they really shouldn't do. But I think if you use things like these life lessons and you're intentional about it, and you get kids to think about things ahead of time. So maybe talking about the consequences of doing something like shoplifting, and they think about it and they can say, well, I really don't want to do that. Then I think that gives them a foundation for if they get stuck in a situation where someone tries to pressure them to do it, but they've decided in their mind that that goes against what they want to do, that at least gives them a fighting chance to resist and walk away. So I think, you know, being intentional about what lessons you want to teach can help you even think about how you want to display those things, and maybe keeping your eyes open for things you can teach from, you know, things you see in the paper or quotes you come across. Maybe have a little file folder or a notebook you can write things down in, just to have those resources.
One of our coaches right now in this talk, Coach Gary Reala. Coach Gary, would you be able to share with us this one you're sharing with me right now about the locker rooms? Coach Gary is actually one of a few people who actually maintain a very big sports coliseum, the Cuneta Astrodome. Coach Gary, would you be able to, would you mind if you want to share this thing you're sharing with me right now? Sorry, putting you in a spot.
Hello, good morning. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, Coach
the
Gary,
video,
you can turn on the video if you want.
Yeah, okay. Turning on. Hi, good morning. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I said to Coach Putit that I'm the one who managed the Cuneta Astrodome, and one of the major problems that we're facing every day, every basketball game we had there is such a mess after the game. And these are from the professional league. And I think I mean, one thing about the professional league, especially the professional players, is they have this culture, I guess, that they're a bit like entitled to everything. So they thought that maybe after using the place, using the venue, they can just leave their trashes inside the room. So, you know, it's a kind of problem. Well, of course, it's our job. It's my people's job to maintain the facility, but at the same time, it's also it will also give a dent to the team's credibility with regards to discipline, especially to the food they ate and the trashes, and sometimes they even left their underwears. So such as those. Yeah. Yes, something like that. Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
Thank you for
Thank
allowing
you,
to
Coach
share, bro.
Gary. Yeah, Cuneta Astrodome is one of the homes of the professional league here in the Philippines, the PBA. So if the PBA wants to play at
Right.
Cuneta Astrodome, they have to go through this big guy right there, Coach Gary Reala. Coach Craig, Gary would be a good matchup when we're at the buffet tables.
All right.
Coach Gary will be there too with
I'll
us.
be expecting that. I'll be expecting that.
With Tim, and I don't know about Jim now because I think Jim has reformed. But yeah, it's just
I've
really
got grandkids I'm trying to stay in shape for, and I'm trying to learn from my bad lessons, trying to teach my own kids. So
yeah, kids will always bring the best out of us as well. I think again, like what Dr. Tim opened up the talk is really sports revealing who we are, but also that opportunity that sports can make us better. And it would just really depend on the people holding sports, the people with influence in sports that would make or break character of especially kids. And I urge you coaches who are listening and maybe share it to your fellow coaches that how important it is for coaches to be the ones leading the change by themselves also trying to get better and being intentional about living a lifestyle that would be important to the lives of our players as well. And Dr. Tim and to the rest of the AAA US crew who are here, thank you so much. And we are very blessed with your presence and your insights. Unless, Dr. Tim, do you want anything else to say to conclude your time? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that comes to mind is think about what you want your legacy to be. And when I think about legacy, and I think Coach Mo can sort of attest to this too, is you think about John Wooden, he almost lived to be 100. And when he was asked later in life, what was he most proud of? It wasn't the 10 national championships. It wasn't the success on the court. It was his legacy through his players. The ones that had become successful businessmen, lawyers, teachers, doctors, people that had become good husbands and fathers. That's what he was proud of. He was proud of the people that he was able to help along their journey of life to be successful. And I think if we can look back on that, then you've led a full, successful life if you've left that track record, because trophies gather dust and championships get forgotten, but the people's lives that you invest in, that's your legacy that lasts beyond and can go beyond, because then they can play it forward and hopefully do for others what you did for them. So that's the whole coaching influence challenge.
And that is coaching in a nutshell. Yeah. Our legacy.
Yes,
it's about our legacy. Thank you, Coach. Thank you, coaches. Thank you, Dr. Tim, for such, again, another great time with you guys. Coaches, next week, we have a good one for you. Also relevant, especially to some of the sports that who want to come back and to get back rolling again. Jim, would you want to invite our coaches for I think the talk on July 24th? What is it about? I mean, the title of the
with the pandemic, there's a lot of stress that everyone's going through, and I'm going to be teaching on critical incident stress management, and basically it's learning how to deal with the stress in our life and how we deal with it emotionally, mentally, physically, as well as spiritually. So we'll have some discussion. I want to break that. So I'm going to have it. I want to, cover some of the topics, but I want to have some good discussion too on each of those things. So be prepared to share, about some of your struggles with those different areas and stuff like that. So I want it to be very interactive and So that's what it's going to be on.
Okay, it's going to be by our very own Jim Rummelhart, and that's on July 24. I think it's 10 a.m., but I will broadcast anyway the details of the doc. Yeah, and be ready for your questions, and we encourage you to share your insights, your struggles, your victories, small victories, whatever that you could share to the group. Be ready for that for next week with Jim Rummelhart. Thank you, Dr. Tim. Thank you, Coach Ryan, and thank you to the coaches, Coach Mo, Coach Craig, Jim. Thank you so much, Brother Totti. Thank you. Again, stay tuned to another great webinar next week. Tim, would you want to end this with a prayer, Tim?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Let's end with a prayer, guys.
God, we just thank you for bringing us all here today and for giving us this opportunity as coaches and teachers to build into the lives of others and to have influence. And we just ask that you work through us and give us your Holy Spirit to be those coaches of influence that you want us to be, that you lead us to impacting the lives of those that you put in our paths, and build us up for that task and give us what we need to be successful in building your kingdom. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, coaches. Thank you for see you next week. AIA guys, Coach Mo, Tim, Craig, Jim, Coach Ryan, Coach Totti, Brother Mon, if we invite you, Coach Gary, could you invite you to stay behind a little if you can? Just to wrap things up, if it's okay with you. Coach Ryan, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Coach
guys.
Ryan.
For the others, thank you. See you next week.
Thank you, Paul.
Great job, Dr. Tim. Great job.
I just got to fix the PowerPoint. Keeps on taking a life of its own.